The morning I discovered my husband's betrayal started like any other Thursday in our comfortable suburban home. I was 55 years old, married for 33 years to the only man I'd ever loved, and I believed with every fiber of my being that we had built something unshakable. My name is Loretta, and I had spent 3 decades perfecting the art of being the kind of wife my mother taught me to be. I cooked elaborate meals, kept our home spotless, raised our 2 children with devotion, and stood beside my husband through every triumph and setback of his career. That Thursday morning, the scent of fresh coffee filled our kitchen as I prepared breakfast. The early light filtered through the curtains I'd sewn myself years ago, casting soft shadows across the marble countertops we'd installed after his last promotion. Everything in our home spoke of careful maintenance, of love expressed through attention to detail. I heard the shower running upstairs where my husband DeShawn was getting ready for work. He was 58, a senior executive at a logistics company, a man who still turned heads with his distinguished silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from decades of success. I set his favorite mug beside his plate, the one our daughter bought him for Father's Day 10 years ago. I had no idea that within hours, the foundation of everything I knew would crack wide open. Before we get going, please leave a comment telling us which state or city you're watching from. And please don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more compelling stories. DeShawn came downstairs looking as impeccable as always in his tailored navy suit. His tie was slightly crooked, and I moved to straighten it without thinking, my hands performing the familiar ritual we'd enacted thousands of times. He barely glanced at me, his eyes already on his phone, scrolling through emails with the kind of focused intensity that had always made me proud. This was the man who provided for our family, who gave us this beautiful home in the suburbs, who worked tirelessly, so I could be a stay-at-home mother, and then, after the children left, a stay-at-home wife. I told myself his distance was just work stress, that his recent habit of coming home late was simply the demands of his position. I told myself a lot of things that morning. "Breakfast is ready," I said softly, gesturing to the table where I'd arranged his meal with care. Scrambled eggs with chives, turkey sausage, wheat toast with the expensive jam he preferred. Everything was exactly as he liked it. "I'll eat at the office," he replied without looking up. "Client meeting ran late yesterday, and I didn't finish the presentation. I need to get in early." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. It had been like this for months now. The breakfasts I prepared went uneaten. The dinners I crafted from recipes I'd spent hours researching sat untouched, while he claimed he'd already eaten with colleagues. Our conversations had dwindled to logistics and pleasantries. Our intimacy had become a distant memory. But I told myself this was normal, that marriages went through phases, that after 33 years, passion naturally cooled into comfortable companionship. DeShawn grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. He paused, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me goodbye. Instead, he patted my shoulder the way you might pat a faithful dog. "I'll be home late again. Don't wait up." The door closed behind him with a soft click. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the breakfast I'd made with love, and felt a hollow ache in my chest that I couldn't quite name. I began clearing the untouched food, scraping eggs into the garbage disposal, watching them disappear down the drain. It felt symbolic somehow, though I couldn't articulate why. After cleaning the kitchen until it gleamed, I moved through my daily routine. I dusted the living room, vacuumed the carpets, organized the already organized linen closet. Our home was a testament to my dedication. Every surface shined, every corner was immaculate. But lately, I'd begun to notice how empty it felt, how the silence seemed to echo off walls that had once reverberated with children's laughter and family arguments, and the warm chaos of life being lived. Now there was just me and my routines, moving through rooms like a ghost haunting her own existence. Around mid-morning, I heard the rumble of a truck in the driveway. Through the front window, I saw the landscaping company van, and my stomach tightened with irritation. DeShawn had hired them 3 months ago without consulting me, insisting that maintaining our extensive gardens was too much work for me to handle anymore. I'd protested, telling him I enjoyed gardening, that it gave me purpose and kept me active. But he'd been insistent, almost aggressive about it, saying that a house like ours needed professional care. Looking back, I should have questioned why he cared so suddenly about the gardens after years of barely noticing them. The driver's door opened and she stepped out. Her name was Janelle, and she was everything I wasn't. She couldn't have been more than 30 years old, all lean muscle and confident stride. Her landscaping uniform consisted of fitted cargo pants and a tank top that showed off arms sculpted from physical labor. Her dark skin gleamed with the kind of health that comes from spending days in the sun, and her hair was pulled back in braids that swung as she moved. She was beautiful in that effortless, natural way that required no makeup or artifice. I watched her unload equipment from the truck, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of strength and capability. I'd met her before, of course. She came every week to tend our gardens. But I'd never paid much attention, always offering a polite greeting before retreating back inside to my domestic duties. Now, watching her through the window, I felt an uncomfortable prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Something about the way she glanced at our house, the slight smile that played at her lips. It was possessive somehow, knowing. I shook off the feeling and went to make myself a cup of tea. I was being ridiculous, letting my imagination run away with me. DeShawn had given me no real reason to suspect anything. Yes, he'd been distant. Yes, he'd been working late. But that was just stress, just the natural evolution of a long marriage. I took my tea to the sunroom and picked up the novel I'd been trying to read for weeks, determined to ignore the sound of the lawnmower starting up outside. But I couldn't concentrate. The words blurred on the page as my mind wandered to uncomfortable places. I thought about the way DeShawn had been coming home smelling of cologne I hadn't bought him. The way he'd started going to the gym at odd hours, developing muscles I hadn't seen since we were first married. The way he'd password protected his phone after 33 years of leaving it casually on the nightstand. The way he'd suggested, just last week, that maybe I should take up a hobby, join a book club, spend more time out of the house. I set down my tea with trembling hands. I was being paranoid. I was being one of those wives, suspicious and shrewish, letting insecurity poison what should be trust. DeShawn had never given me reason to doubt him. He'd been faithful through 3 decades of marriage, through times when younger, prettier women must have thrown themselves at a successful man like him. Why would he stray now, when we were supposed to be entering our golden years together? The lawnmower cut off abruptly, leaving silence in its wake. I heard footsteps on the back porch, then the doorbell rang. I set down my book and went to answer it, smoothing my hair self-consciously. Through the glass, I could see Janelle standing on the porch, holding something in her hands. I opened the door. "Yes?" "Mrs. Clark," she said, and her voice was lower than I expected, almost sultry. "I found this in the bushes by the back fence. Thought you might want it." She held out DeShawn's watch. It was the expensive one I'd bought him for our 30th anniversary, a sleek piece that had cost me months of secretly saving money from my household budget. My mind raced. Why would his watch be in the bushes? He'd been wearing it when he left this morning. I was certain of it. "I must have dropped it while I was working back there last week," Janelle continued, her eyes meeting mine with something that looked like challenge. "Your husband asked me to check on those rose bushes, said they weren't blooming like they should. We spent quite a bit of time back there examining them." The way she said examining them made my skin crawl. There was innuendo there, barely concealed. I took the watch from her, our fingers brushing briefly. Hers were warm and calloused. Mine were cold. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice coming out strangled. Janelle smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He's very particular about those roses. Wants everything perfect for you, he says. He's a good man, your husband, very attentive to details." She turned and walked back toward her truck, and I watched her go, clutching the watch in my fist until the metal edges bit into my palm. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart hammering. I looked down at the watch, turning it over in my hands. The back was engraved with the message I'd had inscribed, "Forever yours, L. Forever." The word mocked me now. I walked through the house in a daze, the watch heavy in my palm like evidence of a crime I didn't want to believe had been committed. I found myself standing in our bedroom, looking at the space we'd shared for 3 decades. The king-sized bed with its expensive linens, the matching nightstands, the photographs on the dresser showing our life in carefully framed moments. Our wedding day, both of us so young and full of hope, the birth of our children, family vacations, anniversary celebrations. All of it suddenly felt like a lie, a performance we'd been giving for an audience of no one. I opened DeShawn's nightstand drawer, something I'd never done without reason. Inside were the usual items: reading glasses, a book on business strategy, antacids, loose change. Nothing suspicious. But beneath the book, I felt the edge of something else. I pulled out a burner phone, cheap and prepaid. My hands shook as I turned it on. It wasn't password protected. Why would it need to be when it was hidden? The messages loaded slowly, each one a knife to my heart. The number wasn't saved under a name, just digits. But the content made it clear who was on the other end. Can't stop thinking about this morning. You're incredible. She's going to her sister's this weekend, right? I'll come over Saturday night. Wore that thing you like under my work clothes today. Couldn't focus. I know you said we have to be careful, but I hate sneaking around. When are you going to tell her? I scrolled back through months of messages, each one more explicit than the last. They painted a picture of a relationship that had been going on right under my nose, in my own backyard, probably in my own bed when I was away. The messages referenced specific dates, and I cross-checked them against my calendar with growing horror. Every Tuesday, I volunteered at the community center. Every Thursday, I had my standing doctor's appointments. Every weekend, I visited my sister in the city. He'd been using my routines, my predictable schedule, as opportunities to betray me. I sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the burner phone, and felt my world dissolving around me. 33 years. We'd been married for 33 years. I'd given him my youth, my body, my trust. I'd raised his children, maintained his home, supported his career, and he'd repaid me with lies and a woman young enough to be our daughter. The tears came hot and fast, streaming down my face as I clutched the phone. I wanted to scream, to break things, to call him right now and unleash 3 decades of fury. But something stopped me, some instinct for self-preservation that I didn't even know I possessed. If I confronted him now, in the heat of emotion, I'd lose. He'd make excuses, gaslight me, turn it around somehow. He'd had months to prepare his lies. I'd had minutes to process the truth. I carefully placed the phone back exactly where I'd found it, beneath the book, at the same angle. I closed the drawer. I went to the bathroom and washed my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I was 55 years old. The face looking back at me was pleasant enough, but lined with age and soft with the comfortable weight gain of a long marriage. My hair, once jet black, was now thoroughly gray, cut in a practical bob that required minimal styling. I'd stopped trying to be beautiful years ago, settling instead for neat and presentable. Why bother with more when your husband barely looked at you? But now I understood. He'd been looking elsewhere. I dried my face and applied a thin layer of makeup, just enough to hide the evidence of tears. Then I went downstairs and did something I almost never did in the middle of the day. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, thinking. The rage was still there, burning in my chest like acid, but I forced myself to breathe through it. I forced myself to think strategically. I had discovered something DeShawn didn't know I knew. That gave me power, but only if I used it wisely. If I confronted him in anger, I'd lose. He'd make excuses, gaslight me, turn it around somehow. He'd had months to prepare his lies. I'd had minutes to process the truth. But if I stayed quiet, if I planned, if I gathered more evidence and prepared myself for war, then I could decide. I could control the narrative. I could make sure that when this house of cards finally collapsed, I wasn't buried in the rubble. I took another sip of wine and allowed myself a cold smile. DeShawn thought he was so clever, carrying on his affair right under my nose. He thought I was too naive, too domestic, too devoted to ever question him. He thought 33 years of conditioning had made me docile and blind. He was wrong. I spent the rest of that afternoon doing exactly what I'd normally do. I prepared dinner, slow-cooked ribs with all the sides he loved. I set the table with care. I changed into a nice dress and touched up my makeup. When DeShawn came home at 7, much earlier than the late he'd promised, I greeted him with a warm smile. "You're home," I said, moving to kiss his cheek. He smelled of soap and that cologne I didn't recognize. He'd showered somewhere. At the gym, he'd claim if I asked, but I didn't ask. "Meeting got canceled," he said, loosening his tie. "Figured I'd come home and spend some time with my wife for once." The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly. I wondered how many lies I'd believed over the months, years maybe. How long had this been going on? How many of his late nights had actually been spent with her? "I'm so glad," I said, and meant it in a way he couldn't possibly understand. I was glad he was here, glad he thought everything was normal, glad he had no idea what I knew. "Dinner's almost ready. Why don't you wash up?" Over dinner I watched him. Really watched him. Perhaps for the first time in years. He ate with enthusiasm, complimenting my cooking as he always did. He asked about my day in that perfunctory way married people do, not really listening to the answer. He talked about work, about office politics and client meetings, spinning his web of normal domesticity. He was good at this, I realized. He'd been performing just as much as I had, both of us playing roles in a marriage that had stopped being real sometime when I wasn't paying attention. "How are the gardens looking?" he asked casually, cutting into his ribs. "That landscaping company working out okay?" I took a sip of water, buying myself a moment. "They're fine. That woman, Janelle, she does good work." Something flickered across his face. Surprise that I'd mentioned her by name? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to identify. "Good, good," he said. "Worth the money, then. I just want everything looking nice for you, baby. You deserve a beautiful home." I smiled at him. "After 33 years, you still take such good care of me." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. His palm was warm, familiar, and completely foreign all at once. "Always," he said. "You're my queen, Loretta. Don't you forget that." I didn't forget. I filed it away with all the other lies, all the other promises, building my case brick by brick. After dinner, we watched television together on the couch, his arm around my shoulders in a parody of affection. I leaned into him, playing my part perfectly, while my mind raced with plans. I needed evidence, real evidence that would hold up in court. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with financially. I needed to understand the full extent of his betrayal before I struck. At 10 o'clock, he yawned and stretched. "I'm beat. You coming to bed?" "In a little while," I said. "I want to finish this show." He kissed the top of my head and headed upstairs. I waited until I heard the shower running again. He showered twice a day now, I realized. Morning and night, washing away the evidence of his double life. When I heard the water shut off, I gave it another 10 minutes, then crept upstairs. He was already asleep, snoring softly in the darkness. I stood in the doorway watching him, this stranger I'd slept beside for 3 decades, and felt nothing but cold determination. I went back downstairs and opened my laptop. It was late, but I didn't care. I began researching divorce lawyers, reading reviews, taking notes. I needed someone ruthless, someone who specialized in cases where assets needed to be protected and uncovered. I found 3 names that seemed promising and jotted down their contact information. Then I opened our bank accounts. DeShawn had always handled the finances, giving me a household allowance and managing everything else himself. I'd been content with that arrangement, trusting him to make the right decisions for our future. Now I looked at our accounts with new eyes, searching for patterns and irregularities. There were several transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Not large amounts, but consistent. 500 here, 1,000 there. I traced one of them and found it led to a credit card I didn't know existed. I couldn't access the full statements without his password, but I made note of every suspicious transaction. Over the coming weeks, I'd need to gather every piece of financial documentation I could find. I'd need to understand where our money was really going, what he might be hiding, what assets could be divided in a divorce. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight. I'd been at this for 2 hours, and I felt exhausted but strangely exhilarated. For the first time in months, maybe years, I had a purpose beyond maintaining a home for a man who didn't appreciate it. I had a mission. I was going to dismantle his life the way he'd dismantled mine, piece by methodical piece. I closed the laptop and turned off the lights. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I felt like I was moving through a dream, or maybe waking up from one. I slipped into bed beside DeShawn, careful not to wake him, and stared at the ceiling in the darkness. Tomorrow I would call the lawyers. Tomorrow I would begin building my case. Tomorrow I would start the process of reclaiming my life. But tonight I lay beside the man who'd promised me forever and felt nothing but the cold, calculated satisfaction of planning his downfall. The next morning, I woke before dawn. DeShawn was still sleeping, his back to me, and I studied the familiar landscape of his shoulders, his neck, the silvering hair at his temples. I'd once found him irresistibly handsome. Now I just saw a target. I slipped out of bed silently and padded downstairs in my robe. The house was dark and quiet, and I made coffee in the pre-dawn gloom, waiting for enough light to make my phone calls seem reasonable. At 8:30, I dialed the first lawyer on my list. Her name was Simone Garrett, and her reviews described her as ruthless but fair and the pit bull you want in your corner. The receptionist answered, and I asked to schedule a consultation. "This is regarding a divorce?" the woman asked, her tone professional and neutral. "Yes," I said, and speaking the word out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. A divorce. We scheduled an appointment for Monday afternoon, 3 days away. I hung up feeling lightheaded. I'd actually done it. I'd taken the first concrete step toward ending my marriage. There was no going back now. I called the other 2 lawyers as well, setting up consultations for later in the week. I wanted options. I wanted to find the person who would fight hardest for me. DeShawn came downstairs just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. He looked tired, older somehow, in the morning light filtering through the kitchen windows. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something that might have been grief for what we'd once had, or what I'd thought we had, but I ruthlessly suppressed it. Grief was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. "You're up early," he observed, pouring himself coffee. "Couldn't sleep," I said truthfully. "Thought I'd get a head start on the day." He nodded, already distracted by his phone. I watched him scroll through messages, wondering if he was texting her, making plans for their next encounter. The thought made me feel sick, but I kept my face neutral. "I'll be working late again tonight," he said without looking up. "Probably won't be home until 10 or so." "Another client meeting?" I asked innocently. "Yeah, something like that. You know how it is." I knew exactly how it was. "Don't work too hard," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. After he left, I began my real work. I went through every drawer in his home office, photographing documents with my phone, bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds. I found a file labeled Miscellaneous that contained information about a condo I'd never heard of. The mortgage was in both our names, but I'd never signed anything. I took pictures of everything, my hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. In the back of a filing cabinet, I found another burner phone, this one turned off. I powered it on and discovered a different set of messages, these ones going back over a year. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a recent affair. This had been going on for at least a year, possibly longer. The messages were a chronicle of their relationship. Tentative flirtations at first, then bolder propositions, then explicit descriptions of their encounters. There were references to our place, which I assumed was the mysterious condo, references to gifts he'd bought her, dinners he'd taken her to, a weekend trip they'd taken together while I'd been visiting our daughter across the country. I photographed every single message, methodically scrolling through months of betrayal. My hands were steady now, my initial shock giving way to cold fury. When I was done, I turned the phone off and replaced it exactly as I'd found it. Then I continued my search. In a locked drawer of his desk, I found the key hidden in a fake book on the shelf. Inside were receipts, hundreds of them, jewelry I'd never seen, dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, hotel rooms, flowers, lingerie. He'd been keeping meticulous records of his affair, probably for tax purposes, the fool. Every receipt was a weapon I could use against him. I spent the entire day documenting everything. By the time I heard his car in the driveway at 6 o'clock, much earlier than the 10 he'd promised, I'd compiled enough evidence to bury him twice over. I'd also transferred copies of everything to a secure cloud storage account he didn't know about, just in case he discovered what I was doing and tried to destroy the evidence. I met him at the door with a smile. "You're home early. I thought you had a late meeting." He looked uncomfortable for a fraction of a second. "It got moved. Figured I'd surprise you. Maybe we could go out to dinner?" Out to dinner. He probably wanted an alibi in case anyone questioned where he'd been. Or maybe he was feeling guilty, trying to assuage his conscience by performing the role of attentive husband. "That would be lovely," I said. "Let me change into something nice." We went to an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place we'd gone to for anniversaries in better years. DeShawn was attentive all evening, holding my hand across the table, asking about my plans for the weekend, complimenting my dress. It was all performance, and I matched him note for note, smiling and laughing and playing the devoted wife. Inside, I was calculating how much this meal cost, and whether it would show up on the credit card statements I'd need for the divorce. "You seem different lately," he said over dessert. "Happier somehow." I nearly laughed at the irony. "Maybe I'm just appreciating what I have," I said. "After 33 years, it's easy to take things for granted. I don't want to do that anymore." He squeezed my hand. "I love you, Loretta. I hope you know that." "I know," I said, and I did know. I knew exactly how much his love was worth. The weekend passed in a strange sort of limbo. DeShawn was home, attentive even, helping me with chores and suggesting we watch a movie together. I wondered if he'd broken things off with Janelle, if he'd gotten cold feet about the affair. But then I saw him texting in the bathroom, heard his phone buzz with messages he made sure to delete immediately, and I knew nothing had changed. He was just performing, the same way I was. Both of us actors in a play neither of us wanted to admit was ending. Monday afternoon, I told DeShawn I had a dentist appointment and drove to Simone Garrett's office in the business district downtown. The building was sleek glass and steel, and her office on the 14th floor had windows overlooking the city. Simone herself was in her late 40s, dressed in a sharp pantsuit, her hair in neat locks, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "Mrs. Clark," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm and confident. "Please, sit down. Tell me why you're here." I sat across from her and began to speak. The words tumbled out, 3 decades of marriage condensing into bullet points and relevant facts. The affair, the financial irregularities, the burner phones, the evidence I'd collected. As I talked, Simone took notes, her expression revealing nothing. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "You've been thorough. That's good. It makes my job easier. Now I need to ask you some hard questions. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with divorce? Because once we start this process, it's difficult to stop." "I'm certain," I said without hesitation. "Good. Do you have access to all marital assets, bank accounts, property deeds, investment portfolios?" "Most of them. I found evidence of a condo I didn't know about, and there are some accounts I can't access without his passwords." She nodded. "We can subpoena those records. What about retirement accounts? Pensions?" We spent the next hour going through every aspect of my marriage and its dissolution. Simone was methodical and thorough, asking questions I hadn't even thought to consider. By the end of the consultation, my head was spinning with legal terminology and strategy. "Here's what I recommend," Simone said, leaning back in her chair. "We continue gathering evidence for another few weeks. You document every suspicious transaction, every unexplained absence. Meanwhile, I'll start preparing the divorce papers and researching his assets. When we're ready, we'll file and serve him all at once. The element of surprise is crucial. We don't want to give him time to hide assets or prepare a defense." "How long will the whole process take?" "That depends on whether he contests it. Given the evidence you've shown me, I suspect his lawyer will advise him to settle quickly and quietly. A man in his position won't want details of his affair becoming public record. We can use that to our advantage." I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. "Whatever it takes." "One more thing," Simone said, her expression serious. "This is going to get ugly. Divorces always do, but ones involving infidelity and hidden assets can get particularly nasty. He's going to say things about you, accuse you of things. Try to make himself look like the victim. You need to be prepared for that. Can you handle it? I thought about 33 years of cooking his meals, and washing his clothes, and raising his children while he built his career. I thought about the way he'd patted my shoulder like a dog before walking out to betray me. I thought about his young mistress, laughing at the foolish old wife who had no idea what was happening in her own backyard. I can handle it, I said coldly. Simone smiled. It was the smile of a shark scenting blood in the water. Then let's destroy him. I left her office feeling more powerful than I had in years. I had an ally now, someone who would fight for me, who saw me as more than just a housewife. I had a plan and the evidence to back it up. All I needed now was patience. The next few weeks were the strangest of my life. On the surface, everything appeared normal. I cooked and cleaned. DeShawn went to work and came home late. We had dinner together when his schedule allowed. We slept in the same bed. But underneath, I was conducting a war. Every day I found new evidence, new receipts, new messages. I documented his comings and goings, cross-referencing them with the messages on his burner phone to build a timeline of his affair. I met with the other 2 lawyers as well, but ultimately decided Simone was the right person for the job. She was expensive, but worth every penny. I also began taking steps to protect myself financially. I opened a bank account in my name only and began slowly transferring my household allowance into it. Not large amounts that would raise suspicion, just 100 here and there. I needed my own money, my own safety net. I consulted with a financial advisor about how to handle the divorce settlement when it came. I was preparing for life after DeShawn, building a foundation so I wouldn't be left with nothing. Through it all, I maintained my performance. I was the perfect wife, loving and devoted, never questioning where he was or what he was doing. I think my complacency made him bolder. He started staying out later, coming home smelling of her perfume mixed with his cologne. He stopped bothering to shower before coming to bed. He must have felt safe, confident that I was too naive or too dependent to ever question him. He had no idea I was documenting everything. 3 weeks after my first meeting with Simone, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard the familiar rumble of the landscaping truck. Through the window, I watched Janelle unload her equipment. She was wearing a tank top and shorts despite the cooling fall weather, her muscular arms on full display. I watched her glance at the house, that same knowing smile on her face, and felt my rage crystallize into something sharp and cold. I'd been focusing on DeShawn, planning his destruction, but I'd neglected the other half of this betrayal. Janelle had come into my home, accepted my money for services rendered, smiled to my face while she destroyed my marriage. She was just as culpable as he was, and she deserved to pay too. I grabbed my phone and went outside. Janelle was trimming the hedges along the driveway, her back to me. I approached slowly, my heart pounding with adrenaline and fury. "Janelle!" I called out. She turned, startled, and her eyes widened when she saw me. For a moment, her confident facade slipped, and I saw wariness there. Good. She should be wary. "Mrs. Clark," she said, recovering quickly. "I didn't hear you come out. Is something wrong with the work?" "The work is fine," I said pleasantly. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something else. Do you have a minute?" She set down her shears, wiping her hands on her pants. "Sure. What's up?" I smiled at her, the same smile I'd been giving DeShawn for weeks, the smile of someone who knows everything while pretending to know nothing. "I wanted to thank you for finding my husband's watch a few weeks ago. It's very precious to me. Our anniversary gift, you know." Something flickered in her eyes. "No problem. Just doing my job." "Yes, your job. Speaking of which, how long have you been working for us now? 3 months?" "About that, yeah." "And how did you hear about us? Did we advertise for a landscaper or was it a referral?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Your husband called the company directly, asked for me specifically, said he'd seen my work at a neighbor's house." "That's strange," I said thoughtfully, "because I remember him saying he found the company online. He must have been mistaken." Janelle's jaw tightened. She knew I was playing with her, circling around something, but she couldn't quite figure out what. People get confused about stuff like that all time. True. Memory is such a funny thing. For instance, I could have sworn my husband was home the day you found his watch, But obviously he couldn't have been if he dropped it while you two were examining the roses together. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't mean... It's fine, I interrupted, my voice sharp as glass. I'm not stupid, Janelle. I know exactly what's been going on. I've known for weeks. I have messages, receipts, photographs. I have everything I need to prove my husband has been betraying me with you. Do you understand what I'm saying? She took a step back, her eyes wide. Mrs. Clark, I don't want your apologies or your explanations, I said coldly. I just want you to understand something. When this all comes crashing down, and it will come crashing down very soon, you're going to lose everything. Your job, your reputation, possibly your business license if I press hard enough. And I will press hard enough. Because you didn't just sleep with my husband. You did it in my home, in my garden, while I paid you to take care of my property. That's not just immoral. It's theft of services. It's fraud. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Tears were streaming down her face now. Please, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to happen. He pursued me. He said you two were separating, that the marriage was over. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised us both. And you believed him? A married man tells you his marriage is over while his wife is in the next room, and you believed him? How old are you, Janelle? 30? Old enough to know better. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. You will be, I promised. I'm going to make sure of it. I turned and walked back into the house, leaving her crying in the driveway. My hands were shaking, and I felt simultaneously exhilarated and nauseated. I'd never confronted anyone like that before, never let my rage show so nakedly. But it had felt good, powerful, like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd lost years ago. 20 minutes later, the landscaping truck pulled out of the driveway without finishing the work. Janelle was gone. I watched from the window as she drove away, and I allowed myself a cold smile. One down. That evening, DeShawn came home early again, looking agitated. He poured himself a drink, something he rarely did on weeknights, and stood at the kitchen counter staring at nothing. Is everything okay? I asked, the picture of wifely concern. The landscaping company called, he said carefully. Said their employee won't be coming back. Some kind of personal emergency. They're going to send someone else starting next week. That's too bad, I said innocently. She did good work. He looked at me sharply, as if trying to read something in my expression. But I kept my face neutral, mildly interested, nothing more. After a moment, he relaxed slightly and took a long drink of his whiskey. Yeah, well, I'm sure the replacement will be fine. We ate dinner in near silence. DeShawn kept checking his phone, his agitation growing with each passing minute. I knew why. Janelle had probably told him about our conversation, and he was trying to figure out how much I actually knew, whether she'd said something that gave them away. He was running calculations in his head, the same way I'd been running them for weeks. The difference was, I already knew the answer. I knew everything. He was the one in the dark now, wondering whether his safe little affair was about to explode in his face. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. It was only a fraction of what he'd put me through. After dinner, as I was washing dishes, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I dried my hands and opened it. The message made my blood run cold. This is Janelle. Please don't do this. I'll lose everything. I have a son to support. His father is gone, and this job is all I have. I made a mistake, but I don't deserve to lose my whole life over it. Please. I stared at the message for a long time. A son. She had a child. For a moment, I felt my resolve waver. I thought about what it would be like to be a single mother, struggling to support a child alone. I thought about the desperation that might drive someone to make terrible choices. But then I thought about my own children, grown now, but still affected by the dissolution of their parents' marriage. I thought about the example I'd be setting if I let this go, if I forgave and forgot and played the role of the understanding wife. I thought about 33 years of my life, given freely to a man who'd thrown it away for someone he'd known for 3 months. I deleted the message without responding. Some mistakes cost everything. She'd made hers with open eyes, knowing he was married, knowing I existed. She'd have to live with the consequences, the same way I'd have to live with the consequences of DeShawn's choices. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. He told me you were frigid, that you didn't love him anymore, that you were just staying together for appearances. He made it sound like he was trapped. The words hit like a physical blow, not because they hurt, but because they revealed so much. This was what DeShawn had been telling her, the story he'd spun to justify his betrayal. I was the frigid wife, the cold woman who didn't appreciate him, who'd let herself go, who'd become boring and sexless. Never mind that he'd been rejecting my advances for months. Never mind that he was the one who'd grown distant and cold. In his version of events, he was the victim, and I was the villain. I typed back, "He's a liar, and you were a fool for believing him. Don't contact me again." I blocked the number and set down my phone. My hands were shaking, not with hurt, but with fury. He'd been poisoning her against me, making himself the suffering husband trapped in a loveless marriage. It was a classic strategy, one that made his betrayal seem justified, even noble. He wasn't cheating. He was seeking the affection his cold wife wouldn't give him. That night, lying in bed beside him while he snored, I made my decision. I was done gathering evidence. I was done playing the part of the oblivious wife. I had everything I needed to destroy him, and I was going to do it now, before he had a chance to rewrite history any further. In the morning, I would call Simone and tell her to file the papers. Let him be surprised. Let him scramble to defend himself. I was finished waiting. I slept better that night than I had in weeks, knowing that the end was finally coming. The next morning, I called Simone from my car in the parking lot of the grocery store, where DeShawn wouldn't overhear if he came home unexpectedly. "I'm ready," I told her. "File the papers, serve him at work. I want it done this week." "Are you sure?" Simone asked. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "All right then. I'll have the papers drawn up today. We can serve him tomorrow afternoon. You should plan to be out of the house when it happens. He's going to be angry, and I don't want you anywhere near him when he first gets the news." "Where should I go?" "Do you have family nearby? Friends?" I thought about my sister, 3 hours away in the city. "I can stay with my sister." "Good. Pack a bag, take your important documents, and go. I'll call you after he's been served." "Thank you, Simone." "Don't thank me yet. The hard part is still coming." I hung up and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. This was really happening. Tomorrow, my marriage would officially be over. The life I'd built for 33 years would cease to exist, and I had no idea who I was going to be on the other side of it. But I knew who I wasn't going to be anymore. I wasn't going to be the naive wife, the devoted homemaker, the woman who sacrificed everything and received nothing in return. That version of Loretta was dead. Whatever came next, whoever I became, she would be someone who knew her own worth and refused to accept less than she deserved. I went through the motions of grocery shopping, filling my cart with items I didn't need, just to maintain appearances. When I got home, DeShawn's car was already in the driveway. He was home in the middle of a workday again. I felt a flutter of anxiety. Had Janelle told him more than I thought? Did he suspect something? I carried the groceries inside and found him in the living room, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, and his face was haggard, aged beyond the few hours since I'd last seen him. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rough. "About what?" He stood up, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "About us. About our marriage." He stood up, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "Loretta, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I think we need to separate." The audacity of it struck me speechless for a moment. He was going to leave me. After everything, after I'd discovered his betrayal and planned my revenge, he was going to beat me to it. He was going to control the narrative, make himself the one who ended things, the one who walked away. "Separate?" I repeated, my voice carefully measured. Where is this coming from? I've been thinking about it for a while, he said, not meeting my eyes. We're not happy, Loretta. When's the last time we really talked? Really connected? We're just going through the motions. I think we'd both be better off apart. I see. I set down my purse and folded my hands in front of me. And what brought this on? Did something happen? He shifted uncomfortably. No, nothing happened. I just think it's time. We can do it amicably, split things fairly. You can keep the house. I'll make sure you're taken care of. The house. He was willing to give me the house because he had his love nest condo that I wasn't supposed to know about. And he'd make sure I was taken care of with what? A modest monthly allowance while he lived it up with his young girlfriend? How generous of you, I said dryly. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, and something in my tone must have registered because wariness crept into his expression. Loretta, I'm trying to do this the right way. I don't want to hurt you more than necessary. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the statement, coming from a man who'd been betraying me for over a year, was too much. More than necessary. That's interesting phrasing. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not as stupid as you think I am, DeShawn. His face went pale. I don't think you're stupid. No? Then why have you been carrying on an affair right under my nose for over a year? Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? He took a step back, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Loretta, I don't know you're confused. There's no... Don't. I held up my hand, my voice sharp as a whip crack. Don't you dare try to lie to me right now. I know about Janelle. I know about the condo. I know about every dinner, every hotel room, every gift you bought her with our money. I have the messages, DeShawn, all of them, from both phones. He collapsed back onto the couch as if his legs had given out. His face was ashen, and his hands trembled as they gripped the armrest. Loretta, I can explain. I don't want your explanations. I don't want your apologies. I don't want anything from you except out. How long? He whispered. How long have you known? Long enough. Long enough to hire a lawyer. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to make sure that when I divorce you, I get exactly what I'm entitled to. He looked up at me with something like horror in his eyes. You hired a lawyer? You're going to divorce me? You were literally just asking me to separate. Why do you look so surprised? I thought we could handle it between ourselves, quietly, without lawyers and courts and evidence of your affair becoming public record, I finished. Yes, I'm sure you did want to handle it quietly. Unfortunately for you, I'm not interested in protecting your reputation anymore. He stood up abruptly, and there was anger in his face now, mixing with the fear. You vindictive bitch, this is how you want to play it? After everything I've given you, this house, this life, everything you have is because of me. No, I said coldly. Everything I have is because I gave you 33 years of my life. Because I raised your children and kept your home and supported your career while sacrificing my own. I earned every bit of this, and you don't get to take it from me because you decided to throw away our marriage for a woman half your age. You don't understand, he said desperately. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't mean for it to happen. She just understood me in a way you never did. Oh, I understand. I understand that you're a cliché. A middle-aged man having a midlife crisis, feeling mortal and old, needing validation from a younger woman to feel alive again. There's nothing original about you, DeShawn. You're just another pathetic statistic. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. You've become cruel. No, I've become honest. There's a difference. We stood there in our living room, 3 decades of marriage dissolving in the space between us, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. He looked destroyed, his carefully constructed lies crumbling around him. Good. Let him hurt. Let him feel a fraction of what he'd put me through. You'll be served with divorce papers tomorrow, I said calmly. My lawyer will be in touch about asset division and settlement terms. Until then, I suggest you find somewhere else to stay. This is my house too, he protested weakly. Then I'll leave. Either way, I don't want to be under the same roof as you tonight. I turned and walked upstairs, my legs shaking but my spine straight. Behind me, I heard him call my name, but I didn't respond. I pulled my suitcase from the closet and began to pack, my movements methodical and efficient. Clothes, toiletries, important documents, jewelry. Everything I might need for an extended stay away from home. I could hear DeShawn moving around downstairs, the clink of glass that meant he was drinking. Let him drink. Let him sit in the ruins of what he'd destroyed and think about how he'd gotten here. When I came back downstairs with my suitcase, he was sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey in front of him. He looked up as I passed, his eyes red-rimmed. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere you're not." "Loretta, please, can't we talk about this? Really talk?" I paused in the doorway and looked back at him. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the young man I'd fallen in love with 33 years ago. The man who'd promised to love and cherish me, to be faithful through all the years of our lives. But that man was gone, if he'd ever really existed at all. In his place was a stranger who'd betrayed every vow he'd ever made. "There's nothing left to say," I told him. "You made your choice. Now live with it." I walked out into the gathering dusk, threw my suitcase in the trunk of my car, and drove away from the house we'd shared for 3 decades. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of the home I'd maintained so carefully. But I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, on the future I was going to build without him. The drive to my sister's house took 3 hours, and I spent it replaying the confrontation in my mind. I'd handled it well, I thought. I'd been strong and cold, and hadn't let him see how much it hurt. But now, alone in the car with the highway stretching endlessly before me, I finally let myself feel it. The grief crashed over me in waves. 33 years of love and trust and partnership revealed as a lie. I'd given him the best years of my life, and he'd repaid me with betrayal. The tears came hot and fast, blurring the road until I had to pull over at a rest stop. I sat in my car in the parking lot and sobbed, great heaving cries that seemed to tear something loose inside me. I cried for the young woman I'd been, so full of hope and dreams. I cried for the years I'd wasted on a man who didn't deserve me. I cried for the future I'd imagined, growing old together, grandchildren, retirement, all the things that would never happen now. But underneath the grief, there was something else, something harder and sharper. It was rage, pure and cold, and it dried my tears like fire. He'd hurt me, but I was going to hurt him back. Not with tears and recriminations, but with lawyers and evidence and the systematic dismantling of everything he thought he'd secured. He wanted a quiet separation where he got to keep his dignity and his assets. Too bad. He was going to get a war. I pulled back onto the highway and continued driving. By the time I reached my sister's house, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, but the porch light came on as I pulled into the driveway. My sister Denise opened the door before I could knock, wrapped in a bathrobe with her hair in a silk scarf. "Loretta, what are you doing here at this hour?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just stood there on her doorstep, suitcase in hand, and started crying again. Denise pulled me inside and wrapped me in a fierce hug, not asking questions, just holding me while I fell apart. Later, sitting at her kitchen table with tea, neither of us was drinking, I told her everything. The affair, the evidence, the lawyer, the confrontation. Denise listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each revelation. "That son of a bitch," she said when I finished. "After everything you did for him, after all the years you stood by him, I was so stupid," I whispered. "How did I not see it?" "You weren't stupid, you trusted him. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. He's the one who betrayed that trust. I should have known. I should have paid attention to the signs." "Stop." Denise reached across the table and gripped my hand. "This is not your fault. None of it. He made the choice to cheat. He made the choice to lie. You did nothing wrong except love someone who didn't deserve it." I squeezed her hand gratefully. I'm going to destroy him. Simone says we have enough evidence to take him for everything. Good, he deserves it. But Loretta, I need you to be ready for what's coming. Divorces get ugly. He's going to fight back. He's going to say terrible things about you, try to make himself look like the victim. Are you prepared for that? I think so. I have to be. Denise studied me for a long moment. You're different. Harder somehow. I've never seen you like this. The old Loretta died when I found those messages. This is who I am now. Just don't lose yourself completely in the rage. Don't let him turn you into someone you're not. I spent the next 2 days at Denise's house, existing in a strange state of limbo. I knew DeShawn was being served with divorce papers at work, and I waited for the fallout with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Simone called me at 3 o'clock on the afternoon of the second day. It's done, she said. He's been served. His initial reaction was predictably angry, a lot of shouting about vindictive wives and unfair proceedings, but my source says he left the office looking shaken. I expect his lawyer will contact me soon to discuss settlement. What happens next? Now we wait. He has 30 days to file a response. In the meantime, I've filed a motion to freeze joint assets pending the settlement. He won't be able to move money around or sell property without court approval. I've also filed for an emergency hearing to determine temporary support payments. How much do you think I'll get? Based on the length of your marriage and your contributions as a homemaker, plus his infidelity and dissipation of marital assets, I'm confident we can get you at least half of everything, possibly more. The condo he bought without your knowledge is a particular problem for him. That's clearly marital property, purchased with marital funds, but he hid it from you. The judge isn't going to look kindly on that. We talked for another 20 minutes about strategy and timelines. When I hung up, I felt a grim satisfaction. The wheels were in motion. There was no stopping it now. DeShawn didn't try to contact me directly, but he did call Denise's house later that evening. She answered, and I listened from the other room as she told him in no uncertain terms that I didn't want to speak to him and to direct all communication through his lawyer. I heard his voice, raised and angry, even from where I was sitting. Denise hung up on him. He's furious, she reported. Says you're being unreasonable, that you won't even listen to his side of the story. I've heard enough of his stories. They're all lies. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Janelle. Please call off your lawyer. I lost my job. The company fired me for unprofessional conduct. They said someone sent them evidence of inappropriate behavior with a client. Was that you? I stared at the message. I hadn't sent anything to her employer. Not yet, anyway. I'd been planning to, but I'd been so focused on DeShawn that I hadn't gotten around to it. I typed back, "Wasn't me. Maybe someone else figured out what you were doing. Maybe another client's wife. Maybe karma. Either way, not my problem." The response came immediately. "You're a cold-hearted bitch. I hope you're happy." I blocked the number without replying. I was many things right now, but happy wasn't one of them. Satisfied, maybe. Vindicated. But happiness felt like a luxury I couldn't afford until this was all over. The following week, DeShawn's lawyer, a slick-looking man named Thomas Barrett, contacted Simone to discuss settlement. They went back and forth for days, negotiating terms. DeShawn was trying to lowball me, offering a lump sum that wouldn't support me for more than a few years. Simone rejected it immediately and countered with our terms. Half of all marital assets, including the house, the condo, retirement accounts, and investment portfolios, plus alimony for 10 years to reflect the career I'd sacrificed to support his. Barrett came back with a revised offer that was better, but still not good enough. The negotiations dragged on, each side digging in. Meanwhile, the temporary support hearing resulted in a court order requiring DeShawn to pay me $5,000 a month until the divorce was finalized. It wasn't what I deserved, but it was enough to live on. I moved out of Denise's house and into a small apartment closer to town. I couldn't go back to the house I'd shared with DeShawn, not yet. Maybe not ever. The thought of sleeping in the bed where he'd betrayed me, of cooking in the kitchen where I'd played the fool for so long, made me physically ill. So I rented a modest one-bedroom and began the process of building a new life. It was harder than I expected. For 33 years, my identity had been tied to being someone's wife, someone's mother. Now I was just Loretta, a 55-year-old woman with no career, no purpose, and no idea what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. I spent my days in the apartment, reading or watching television or just staring at the walls. Denise came by regularly, worried about me, but I couldn't seem to shake the lethargy that had settled over me like a fog. "You need to get out," Denise urged one afternoon. "Join a gym, take a class, do something. You're going to go crazy sitting here alone all day." "I don't know what I want to do," I admitted. "I've been a wife for so long. I don't know how to be anything else." "Then figure it out. You have time. You have money coming in. Use this as an opportunity to discover who you are beyond your marriage." Her words stuck with me. That night, unable to sleep, I made a list of things I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Learn to paint, take a cooking class, not the practical cooking I'd been doing for decades, but something fun and creative. Travel. I'd never been anywhere except family vacations decided by committee. I wanted to see the world on my own terms. The next day, I enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the community center. It was full of older women like me, many of them also recently divorced, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. We painted and chatted, sharing stories of our lives and our losses. None of them judged me. None of them thought I was crazy for wanting to destroy the man who'd betrayed me. They understood because they'd been there too. I also started going to a gym, not to lose weight or make myself attractive for some future partner, but because it felt good to be strong, to take up space in the world. I hired a personal trainer, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who pushed me harder than I'd ever pushed myself. The physical exertion was cathartic, burning away some of the rage and pain that had been consuming me. Slowly, incrementally, I began to feel like a person again. Not the person I'd been before, that naive, devoted wife, but someone new, someone harder and more cynical, yes, but also more aware, more present in her own life. 3 months after I left, the divorce negotiations were still ongoing. DeShawn was being stubborn, refusing to accept that he was going to lose half of everything. His lawyer kept trying to argue that I deserved less because I hadn't contributed financially to the marriage. Simone shut that down every time, citing case law and precedent. The courtroom battles were exhausting, but I showed up to every hearing, looked DeShawn in the eye, and refused to back down. At one particularly contentious hearing, his lawyer tried to introduce evidence that I'd been emotionally abusive during our marriage, citing the confrontation with Janelle as proof of my vindictive nature. Simone destroyed the argument in minutes, pointing out that confronting your husband's mistress hardly constituted abuse, and reminding the judge of the extensive evidence of DeShawn's actual betrayal. DeShawn sat at his table looking smaller somehow, diminished. The confident executive had been replaced by a man who'd lost control of his narrative. I felt no pity for him, only cold satisfaction. After that hearing, Simone pulled me aside. "He's going to settle. Barrett told me his client can't afford to keep fighting. Between the legal fees and the temporary support, he's bleeding money. I expect we'll have final terms within the week." She was right. 3 days later, Barrett called with a settlement offer. Half of all marital assets, including the house and the condo. 8 years of alimony at $4,000 a month. Half of his pension and retirement accounts. It wasn't everything I'd asked for, but it was close enough. "Take it," Simone advised. "If we go to trial, we might get more, but we might get less. This is a good deal. It sets you up for the rest of your life." I took it. We signed the papers, and just like that, my marriage was over. Officially, legally, finally over. I sat in Simone's office with the decree in my hands and felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. "What are you going to do now?" Simone asked. "Live," I said simply. "For the first time in 33 years, I'm going to live for myself." The settlement money hit my account 2 weeks later. It was more money than I'd ever had in my name only, enough to buy a house, to travel, to do whatever I wanted. I decided to keep renting for a while, to give myself time to figure out where I actually wanted to be. The house I'd shared with DeShawn sold quickly, and my half of the proceeds added to my nest egg. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable. More importantly, I was independent. I heard through mutual friends that DeShawn had moved in with Janelle, of all people. Apparently, they'd reconciled after she lost her job, united in their shared victimhood at my hands. The thought should have made me angry, but instead, I found it almost funny. They deserved each other, two people who'd destroyed a marriage now trying to build a relationship on those ruins. I gave it a year, maybe less, before they imploded. I was right. 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I heard they'd broken up. Janelle had apparently discovered that DeShawn was just as capable of lying to her as he'd been to me. The irony was delicious. I heard he'd moved into a small apartment, was struggling with the alimony payments, and had been passed over for a promotion at work when the details of his affair became office gossip. His carefully constructed reputation had crumbled, and he was facing the consequences alone. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I'd taken up painting seriously and had even sold a few pieces at a local gallery. I'd traveled to Italy, to France, to places I'd only dreamed of seeing. I'd made new friends, women who knew me as Loretta, not as DeShawn's wife. I'd discovered I liked being alone, liked having control over my own life and my own choices. A year after the divorce, I ran into DeShawn at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen him since the final hearing. He looked terrible, aged and worn down, his expensive clothes hanging on a frame that had lost weight and muscle. He saw me and froze. His cart stopped in the middle of the aisle. "Loretta," he said, his voice hoarse. "DeShawn." We stood there awkwardly, strangers who'd once been everything to each other. I waited for the anger to rise up, the bitterness, the hurt, but I felt nothing. He was just a man I used to know, someone from a life that no longer felt like mine. "You look good," he said finally. "Happy." "I am happy. You?" He shrugged, a defeated gesture that would have been unthinkable from the confident man I'd married. "Getting by, learning to live with my choices." "Good, we all have to do that." I moved to push my cart past him and he reached out, not touching but almost. "Loretta, I just want you to know, I'm sorry for everything. I was a fool and I lost the best thing I ever had. I know it's too late, but I wanted you to know." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw genuine regret in his eyes. It was too late, decades too late, but some small part of me appreciated the apology anyway. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I really do. Just not with me." I walked away, leaving him standing in the aisle, and I didn't look back. Not even once. Because he was my past, and I was finally, blessedly, living in my present. And my future stretched out before me, full of possibility and promise, waiting for me to claim it on my own terms. The woman I'd become was nothing like the woman I'd been. That naive, trusting wife was gone forever, destroyed by betrayal and reborn in its aftermath. The new Loretta was harder, yes, but also freer. She knew her worth. She knew her strength. And she knew that she would never again make herself small for someone who didn't deserve her. As I loaded groceries into my car, the sun warm on my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Peace. Real, genuine peace. The war was over. I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed him, though I had, but because I'd survived. I'd rebuilt. I'd become someone I was proud to be. And that, more than any settlement check or legal victory, was my true revenge. So, please tell me what you thought of the story in the comments below. And if you liked this tale, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me to keep creating these wonderful stories. Until tomorrow. All my love.